Hello friends, how are you all doing? I hope after our discussion on evolution of cities, on ancient, urban and modern, you all are in your much higher spirit to explore more and more dimensions of urban sociology. And to help you all in this exploration, I am here with all of you to discuss another interesting session on urbanization and changing faces of urban communities. So, as you all know that urbanization implies a cultural and social psychological process whereby people acquire the material and non-material culture, including behavioral patterns, forms of organization and ideas that originated in or are distinctive of the city. Urbanization seen in this light has also resulted in what Toynbee has called the westernization of the world. It also leads to cultural diffusion and acculturation. Let me take a minute to explain you these two concepts of diffusion and acculturation. As students of cultural studies, diffusion is nothing but the process of movement of cultural traits. For example, if I spray perfume in one corner of our classroom and if you are sitting on the other corner of the classroom, right now though we are virtually connected, but just imagine a physical classroom. Similarly, culture also travels, the traits of the culture also travel from one culture to the other culture even if they are not in direct contact. That is diffusion. Urbanization may be manifest either as intra or inter-society diffusion, that is, urban culture may spread to various parts of the same society, or it may cross cultural or national boundaries and spread to other societies as well. It involves both borrowing and lending. In the process of acculturation, individuals acquire the material possessions, behavioral patterns, social organization, bodies of knowledge and meanings of groups whose culture differs in certain respects from their own. Urbanization as seen in this light is a very complex process. When we talk about process of urbanization in India, the story of urbanization needs to be studied in a historical context, a story of spatial and temporal discontinuities as defined by famous urban geographer Ramchandran in his book published in 1989. The earliest urban developments in India can be seen in the Indus Valley civilization, and in the early historical period, urbanization was experienced in the middle Ganga plains and the southern parts of the Indian peninsula. The factors and indicators responsible for urbanization varies from time to time. In the prehistoric period, urbanization was synonymous with the origin and rise of civilization, thus was more of a cultural process. From historical periods to the British regime, urbanization was related to the rise and fall of kingdoms, dynasties and empires. Thus, urbanization was a political process. In modern times, urbanization is seen as a process which is closely associated with economic development and industrialization. Thus, urbanization is an economic process. The urban history of India can be divided into 5 distinct time periods. These are the prehistoric period between 2350 to 1800 BC, which is reflected in cities associated with Indus Valley civilization. Secondly, the early historic period between 600 BC to 500 AD reflected in ancient cities. Thirdly, the medieval period between 600 AD to 1800 AD, which is reflected in medieval cities. Fourthly, the British period between 1800 to 1947 reflected in industrial cities, and the fifth aspect is the post-independence period, that is after 1947, reflected in industrial and post-industrial cities. The literature on the history of urbanization in India represents various aspects. Let us try to identify them. Emergence of new social relationships among people in cities and between people in cities and those in villages through a process of social change. Rise and fall of cities with changes in the political order. Growth of cities based on new productive processes which alter the economic base of the city. Physical spread of cities with the inflow of migrants who come in search of a means of livelihood as well as a new way of life. Cities are collective artifacts and stands apart from the countryside in terms of cross-cultural influences. It is a melting pot of people with diverse ethnic, linguistic and religious backgrounds. From this perspective, urbanization in India developed as a socio-cultural process of transformation of folk, peasant or feudal village societies. India has a continuous history of urbanization since 600 BC. Over this period, three major socio-cultural processes have molded the process of urbanization. What are they? Aryanization, Persianization and Westernization. Now let us understand what does this mean. Aryanization is that period where it is believed that Aryans came to India and they initiated a new kind of a urban culture. With the onset and beginning of Delhi Sultanate and Mughal rule. So, with the onset of Delhi Sultanate and with the onset of Mughal rule in India, when India entered into medieval period, urbanization had this perspective of Persianization, where we could see a clear influence of Mughal, Persian, Turkish influence on urbanization. Then we had Portuguese coming to India, we had Britishers coming to India, and we all know that British rule almost all, which lasted for about 200 years, it has led massive impact not only on entire social life of India, but exclusively even on urban centers. And as we have discussed, that because of their establishment of railway lines, giving more and more importance to the establishment of railway stations, seaports, the concept of urbanization underwent lot of change. And so when we are talking about westernization, we are talking about the impact of British rule on Indian urban process. In India, the administrative and political developments have played significant role in urbanization in the past, and they continue to be relevant even today. Urban centers in India emerged, declined or even vanished with the rise and fall of kingdoms and empires from about 5th century BC to 18th century AD. Patilputra, Delhi, Madurai and Golconda are all illustrations of cities that flourished, decayed and sometimes revived in response to changes in the political scene. The administrative or political feature often acts as an initial stimulus for urban growth, which is then further advanced by the growth of commercial and industrial activities. Urbanization in modern times is essentially an economic process. Today, the city is a focal point of productive activities. It exists and grows on the strength of the economic activities existing within itself. It is the level and nature of economic activity in the city that generates growth and therefore further urbanization. There are three major types of spatial movements of people relevant to urbanization process. What are they? Firstly, the migration of people from villages to towns and cities leading to macro urbanization. Secondly, the migration of people from smaller towns and cities to larger cities and capitals leading to metropolization. Thirdly, the spatial overflow of metropolitan population into the peripheral urban fenned villages leading to a process of suburbanization. It is essentially an outgrowth of metropolization, and here there is a reverse flow of people from city to the countryside. It is important to quote Professor Annie Power from London School of Economics, who believes that cities are at the center of human civilization and invention. Even very elementary ancient civilizations worked out ways of gathering people together and then pursuing progress, always around a collection of buildings and people. Out of that emerges an unbelievably complex social and physical structure of the city. Infrastructural development, growing economic and cultural heterogeneity, expansion of city into merging of fringe villages, emergence of city as the melting pot of cultures and as harbinger of social change, including that of globalization, has changed the face of urban communities. Urban infrastructure should be equipped with all the necessary facilities. It should give a decent quality of life to its residents, promising clean and sustainable environment by applying smart solutions in domain of sanitation, waste management, public transport and governance. The city landscape represents the icons of modernity with an increase in mobility and accessibility, economic efficiency and industrialization, along with an improvement in public hygiene. This visual image is also embedded with the idea of social, which believes in the goodness of modernity. We are longing for a dream city that suits our personality and can fulfill all our demands and cravings. We hope that this city turns into dreams and dreams turn into city. Therefore, provide us a modern city living without any urban pathologies or abnormalities. Urbanization is not only about economic growth. It should also accommodate the requirements and demands of urbanites and meet the needs of present dwellers while improving the quality of life for all. Ulrich Beck and Elwood opine that in reality, living in a modern metropolis is not exactly a smooth sailing experience, as we besotted with the constant onslaught of various socio-cultural problems such as crime, moral degradation, unhealthy lifestyles and lack of community living. And that is why you should definitely read the books of Beck and Elwood. The growth of large cities constitutes perhaps the greatest of all the problems of modern civilization. While the city is a problem in itself, creating certain biological and psychological conditions which are new to the race, the city is even more an intensification of all our other social problems such as crime, vice, poverty and degeneration. These new socio-cultural challenges are confusing to our urban culture and are beginning to constrain our emotional resources to live our lives as we struggle between the sphere of work, family and leisure. The modern industrial development and process of urbanization has brought into forefront multiple issues including public safety, emotional and psychological anxiety, violent and sexual crimes towards infants, children and women, road rage, drug abuse. The neighborhood parks and public open spaces are also becoming breeding ground for moral degeneration. Even this is matter of concern. Muhammad and Ayub in their book published in 2013 say that the trends in urban development trigger changes in urban communities' living and cultural attitude. The residential design and layout in particular instigate segregation, that is dividing society via class, status and financial ability among city dwellers and therefore change the landscape of the urban living. There is a worrying trend in our modern community living with voluntary segregation of society. Developers are cashing in on new development based on gated community concept as opposed to the traditional open community and an antithesis of virtuous community living. There is multiplicity of image and identity of landmarks, nodes, skylines and building lines that competes with the city's native genius loci, resulting in common elements and views to become alien, therefore significantly reducing its ability to be memorable and remembered. There is greater dependence on motorized and mechanical way of life. It is estimated that at present about 70% of greenhouse gas emissions come from cities and more than 70% energy is consumed in urban areas. Thus, managing environmental issues in cities is not only challenging but also has immense impact on the quality of life in future also. The renowned urban designer Jan Gehl observes that as a society becomes steadily more privatized with private homes, cars, computers, offices and shopping centers, the public component of our lives is disappearing. It is more and more important to make the cities inviting so we can meet our fellow citizens face to face and experience directly through our senses. Public life in good quality public spaces is an important part of a democratic life and a full life. Smart cities are key aspects of present day urban communities. It is an urban renewal and retrofitting program by the Government of India with a mission to develop 100 cities that provide core infrastructure and give a decent quality of life to its citizens, a clean and sustainable environment and application of smart solutions. So, the focus of smart solutions is on sustainable and inclusive development, and the idea is to look at compact areas, create a replicable model which will be an example for other aspiring cities. The core infrastructure elements in a smart city would include adequate water supply, assured electricity supply, sanitation including solid waste management, efficient urban mobility and public transport, affordable housing especially for the poor, robust IT connectivity and digitalization, good governance especially e-governance and citizen participation, sustainable environment, safety and security of citizens, particularly women, children, elderly and health and education. To address the challenges of health and sanitation, the Government of India has launched the urban version of Swachh Bharat Mission with objectives of modern and scientific municipal solid waste management to effect behavioral change regarding healthy sanitation practices. And we also have to generate awareness about sanitation and its linkage with public health. Capacity augmentation for urban local bodies. To create an enabling environment for private sector participation in CAPEX, that is capital expenditure, and OPEX, that is operation and maintenance. Urban communities as melting pot of culture implies a heterogeneous society becoming more homogeneous with different elements melting together into a harmonious whole with a common culture. The melting pot concept is most commonly used to describe the assimilation, that is bringing of so many elements together. Changes in urban social life in the context of globalization have expanded the scope and speed of cultural interactions across societal boundaries. The incidence of migration and emergence of cultural diaspora bring about intense cultural, social and economic interactions. In this context, Yogendra Singh, he has given a wonderful explanation. He has divided the post-globalized changes occurring in Indian society into two categories. First, those which concerns the substantive structures of culture and its relationship with social institutions, and second, those which refer to the processes of change in culture, especially engendered by the forces of globalization, telecommunication, revolution and the emergence of a market economy in a qualitative new form. The structural issues of change for Yogendra Singh refer to the impact of globalization upon local culture, the nature of cultural identities at the local, regional and national levels, and the extent of their inner resilience to withstand the forces of globalization. The emerging popular culture in India and its impact of different segments of Indian society. The other substantive issues relate to the processes like nation building, language as a marker of cultural identity, growth of ethnicity, changes in community structure, changes in leisure activities and the like. Friends, I am tempted to give you one more example, like for instance during Durga Puja, when people play Dandiya, Garba, or in Telangana we have very famous Batkamma that is being played all over the world. So what Yogendra Singh is trying to tell us is a very beautiful implication of this cultural growth and expansion. Nowadays Garba, Dandiya do not confine to Gujarat. Batkamma does not confine only to Telangana. It is found everywhere, and probably this element also gets added in the changing face of the urban communities. Friends, in this lesson we have tried to understand about the various dimensions of urbanization and how it has contributed in the changing faces of the urban communities. If you have anything to share with me, please do write to me on pandevini@gmail.com. Continue to identify the emerging faces of new cities in India, and I will meet you very soon with a new perspective of urban sociology, where we are going to discuss about the theories in connection with urban sociology. So till then, thanks a lot for being with me. Be safe, be happy. See you all. Bye-bye.